Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be at ReeFi, which is similar to ReFi, actually a subset of ReFi. For those who don't know, is regenerative finance. Basically, developing economies and token models around incentivizing people to benefit the community. And ReFi is based on a coral reef project that we want to learn more about. We're having one of the founders there, kind of starting prematurely. This will be a recorded space, and this will be made available on platforms like YouTube in the future. But yeah, this is as a greater initiative to bring workshops and spaces and a lot of educational content from highlighting projects, highlighting developer resources and new documentation, new products, new communities, and just a way to look for more information in the software engineering and the Web3 space. Where may start transitioning out of entirely Web3 and strictly more into developer-oriented things. I know as minority programmers, we have a lot of people from all across the industry that would like to tap in to our talent pool. And yeah, and so we're going to start that over. If you have any suggestions, please reply on Twitter. Please join our Discord. Please get on our Telegram, LinkedIn. We're on all social media platforms. We've been for a few years now. Contact us with what you want to learn. If you're wanting to get into business development, UI, UX, not just software engineering and blockchain, any part of the industry, we're here as a resource, a professional at work. We have mentors. Please come on over, contact us, and let's see how we can get you in the tech game. And so, yeah, we'll just be waiting up until then. Thought I would say something because it's a recorded space. But yeah, let me just mute until then and send out some kind of notification for people joining on board. How you doing, Brett? Let me just add you to speak and co-host. Yeah, thank you for joining on board. Let me just send that out. And yeah, just for your information, this is a recorded space. Going to publish this later so more people can hear about it because time zones are difficult, as you know. But yeah, let me just go ahead and share this around. But how you doing today?
Hey, thank you for bringing me up. I think you're waiting on David to join. I think he's probably only a minute or two away, but he can. I'm able to help him on a couple of things if he needs it.
Yeah. We're also waiting for a few of our members to join, especially on our internal team. We just got off a scrum and some design calls, so yeah, all of us are waiting to join too. And I left that prematurely, but yeah, give me 1 second to kind of publicize this around.
Yep.
How you doing? How you doing?
Good evening, good morning.
Yep, those are both correct for people in the audience. I know we have some people joining us from Africa, from India. Y'all are in Australia. We got people from America as well. Um, but yeah. I just kind of gave a brief intro before anyone came. This is also a recorded session, so we can share among other people who are interested. But yeah. Thanks for joining us on board, David. And um, yeah, let's go and get started. So one of the main motivations for doing this and is the interest around refi projects and I think refi is one of the best use cases and ways for mass adoption and really just benefiting society in general. And refi is a play on DeFi, which is like decentralized finance, but it's regenerative finance, where essentially people in the community are using token economics are incentivized to benefit the community. And there's been a lot of projects that have been coming out of the woodwork in the past year because of refi. And yeah, I came across refi, play on the words. And yeah, I wanted to learn more about what you guys are doing, how you guys are leveraging refi and Web3, a little bit about yourselves, and just yeah, learn more about your project and learn more about ways we can benefit the world and benefit the environment through Web3. So yeah, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit about kind of your background and how you came to Web3 first, that would be an amazing start.
Yeah, cool. I might just introduce myself. My name's David. I'm the son of a career-long marine biologist. So I've been fortunate enough to spend plenty of time in the water, in the ocean, on the reef, and even to the point of helping out with different mapping activities and assessment of damage and things like that. So Brett, who's up here as a speaker, is my father, and we kind of went down this rabbit hole together. But we came at it from probably a bit of a different approach to many others, where Brett actually invented some really cool technology, which is allowing us to do some things that have never been done before. And well, not at the scale that we're doing it, and not at the speed that we're doing it. And so I might just invite him to give a little bit of his background, and kick off by talking a little bit about what brought us to this space in the first place.
Yeah, hi. Good morning, good evening, everybody. First off, I just want to say I want to acknowledge the Quandamooka people, who are the traditional custodians of the water in which I generally play. When I go out on the bay in my boat, it's on Quandamooka sea country. And I want to acknowledge their leaders, past, present, and future. Yeah, I'm a marine biologist and have been lucky enough to work in the Great Barrier Reef for many, many years. And David, as you mentioned, has actually done a number of projects with me, not just in the Great Barrier Reef, but elsewhere in the world, where we're actively engaged in coral reef assessment, damage assessments, and restorations. One of the things that so many people kind of, don't intuitively grasp is the scale of the ocean. It covers 70% of the planet. That's why they call it a blue planet. And the shallow coastal reefs, are enormous. The Great Barrier Reef, for example, is the size of Germany. And if someone said to you, you need to go out and check out each of the towns in Germany and, for example, describe the condition of their roads, it might be a little bit more intuitive to you than the question of, oh, let's go and work out whether the coral on the Great Barrier Reef is up this year or down this year, or what's struggling, etc. So the scale of the reef is enormous, and the logistical constraints of having to work there are just crazy. You have to go out in big boats. They're expensive. You can have few people. You can only be out at sea for weeks or a month at a time before you have to come back. When you're underwater, you've got to hold your breath or breathe out of a scuba tank, and that limits your time, etc. So the logistical challenge of it is crazy. So we're working on a solution that brings the reef to people in such a way that you don't have to have a boat. You don't have to be out at sea or under the water only a few minutes at a time, and yet you can have that experience. And we believe that that is the way to craft a new community of people who will pay better attention to and help look after the world's coral reefs. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. I was very interested in like the kind of the intersection between tech and the reefs, and then like a little bit about like the Web3 aspect and how you guys are leveraging that.
Yeah, cool. So I guess we started with this premise that that the technology that Brett's invented is going to give us access to the reef at a scale and speed that we've not had the opportunity to have before. And while that's great in and of itself, the real benefit is actually about bringing people together and creating a community with a big voice, and giving them the tools to actively participate in this space. And we'd kind of spent a little bit of time investing and looking at blockchain, but not really understood or had this concept of ReeFi DeFi in our minds. And as we started looking at how different opportunities to build communities and bring people together, um, DeFi, ReeFi, DAOs, this sort of stuff kept popping up, and the idea that we can create open, transparent perspectives for a global community of what the reef is like, give them access to view that data, to poke and prod it for themselves, and be able to ask the right questions and see the right answers is really appealing. And I guess by bringing people together and giving them that sort of custodianship of their own patch of reef, it really in our minds creates an opportunity to build a strong community, a very, very big, tens of millions of people, all with a really deep passion for and connection to the reef. People who've never been able to access the reef before now can adopt a digital twin of the reef, and explore it in all kinds of ways. Check out behind the scenes videos of the data collection, and check out the videos and the photos of the reef, which is their patch or other people's patches. And we've already built proof of concepts around augmented reality apps, which allow you to bring the reef into your classroom or into your lounge room and share it with your friends and family and other students and things like that. We've built a proof of concept of the virtual reality experience, which allows you to swim through in VR a patch of reef, which isn't just some cartoony gimmicky thing, but actually looks and feels exactly like what you're seeing in the video from the real world location. It's accurate in terms of its location, such that you could put on a GPS watch in VR and see where you are, and if you went to that location in the real world, you'd see the same thing. So I guess for us, tokenization of the reef allows people to to adopt their own patch of reef and connect to it and better understand it.
Okay, so just so I'm a little bit more clear about kind of how to join, or what the kind of proof of concept looks like, is you guys are using Brett's tech to essentially capture data around the reef and visualizations, and then are you guys like offering NFT based access into viewing that in VR AR, or yeah, like is that the flow, or can you kind of be a little bit?
Yeah. So essentially, the tokenization of patches of reef um, allows us to fund the survey work and some conservation work that's required on the reef. And in exchange for doing that, rather than the traditional methods of donating money blindly to a not-for-profit organization and sort of not knowing where that gets spent, how that gets spent, or receiving anything in return, it just sort of disappears into the ether. For us, this is an opportunity to build a product out of the data, so that people aren't just handing over money and walking away with a brief feel good. They actually get to interact with the data that's collected. They get to explore the photos and the videos, and anything that we build out of that data, the community will get access to.
And so one thing I'm very interested in, especially when people start to tokenize this, and we see this with the tokenization of real estate, is kind of how are you guys, or you may not have this kind of completely um, flushed out. It's like, how do you guys deal with hosting that data? Like, is that in a centralized place and it's linked to an NFT, or where is this data like stored, or yeah, that
Yeah, I'll answer the first part of that, and then Brett, I might get you to jump in terms of the idea of ownership of the reef. It being very different to the traditional real estate kind of ownership model. But essentially, the volume of data that's being collected by the glider and the way we then process that and analyze it and turn it into 3D models, or run AI models on it to identify different species of fish and coral and sharks, etc. There's no way we could ever put all of that data on chain, and so the tokenization, the NFT, essentially is a key which identifies which patch you've adopted, and some key metrics for that patch, which become this immutable, auditable trail. Which, if you then go and inspect and interpret the data off chain, it should be a direct link, and should be a proof of what's there in behind the scenes.
okay. And so what's kind of that like, well, how does this, like, the collection and the conservation, like, actually scale? Like, how much can you plot, and then how does this like grow with additional people like adopting reefs, and yeah, more and more kind of demand for um the tokenization of the reef?
Yeah, Brett, if you just want to quickly jump in on the difference, I guess, between adoption of a patch of reef and the real estate owning a patch of land, and then expand into the size of the GBR.
Yeah, look, I guess the first thing to say is that reefs around the world, they exist in many, many countries and under many different tenure arrangements. Some of them still have traditional owners as the primary tenure holder, but for most part, they are public access resources, and as a result, they really don't get the care and attention that they require, because there's simply not enough people who are actively engaged and putting in either time or money into helping look after these reefs. So what we want to do is create a very, 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 very large scale community. And we believe that the only way that we can do that is to give people a connection through this photorealistic digital twin. So when we talk about a digital twin, or you would in a Web3 sense, you would describe it probably as a metaverse. We try to avoid some of the terminology around that, even though the tokenization means pretty much the same thing. But the notion of owning parts of the Great Barrier Reef is not only strange, but quite a negative notion to many people. So we want to be really, really clear that what we're doing is giving people the opportunity to, a little bit like the old Adopt a Highway programs, they can be a custodian for a particular part of the reef in its digital twin. Dave, if there's anything else you want me to jump on there, just let me know.
Yeah, so we were just talking too about the scale, and so our initial project, we're looking at about 8,000 patches of reef on Heron Island Reef. It's a very, very iconic Great Barrier Reef location. There's a resort there. There's been plenty of work done there over the years. There's a research station there. But even still, the scale of what we can monitor on a reef to date has been so limited, and we're really excited that we can go and collect hectares worth of data in just a couple of days on that reef and really bring it to the world. But Brett, if you can kind of then expand out the scope of that, so the first 8,000 people who want to have this experience and come on this journey, that's great. But what we're really looking to do is find the 80,000 and the 800,000 and the 8 million.
Yeah, look, we start from the premise that ultimately it's people who, through their actions, will end up influencing politics around the world, influencing the way reefs are protected, influencing the things which are the biggest threats to the reef in terms of climate change. At the moment, it's a cool thing to be a marine biologist, but the simple reality is marine biologists are a small group of people. There's very, very few of us. We're very, very privileged to see the reef. And we're all preaching to the choir. If we try and tell each other how important it is, that's a huge waste of time. So what we really have to do is engage more broadly with the global community. And the Great Barrier Reef it's literally the size of Germany. It's 300,000 square kilometers. I should have looked up what that is in imperial square miles, etc. But the point is, if we tokenize the reef at the scale of, for example, an acre, there's close on 100 million people who could each own part of the Great Barrier Reef in its digital twin and have an acre of reef in which to swim around and play around in VR, AR experiences. And once you start to get something approaching the tens of millions of new people loving the reef and doing what they can to support it and protect it, then you start to change the narrative worldwide and the focus worldwide. And that's when you can start to have an impact. So we want to begin in a small and important part of the Great Barrier Reef and spread this project through until we've got the great majority of the reefs on the GBR surveyed and being looked after in this Adopt a Reef program by tens of millions of new reef lovers.
One thing I wanted to ask about is like what is aside from the collecting this data, like how does that translate into conservation, and like how is that measured, or how is like how is like the more data collection translate to more conservation, and is there like a way in the system to like measure that up?
Yeah, they David, can you maybe just focus on for a second the activities that we're able to do, and when I say we, I talk about members of the community living all around the world in all different time zones can, through a Web3 interface, do a whole range of things which lead to direct support for the Great Barrier Reef through their actions and through third-party actions. David?
Yeah, so particularly on the Great Barrier Reef, there are a number of activities which can be undertaken by citizens. It's a bit of a change in recent years where they've opened up, and things like killing invasive species, fixing, overturning damaged corals, replanting new corals. There's about a dozen or eight different activities that can be undertaken on the reef, and with the scale of the reef, no individual can make any kind of significant impact to protect the reef. But if we have that scale of community, and give people the opportunity to identify issues, see them with their own eyes, and really connect to the reef and what's going on there, and choose to participate in something which is really collaborative and has the ability to scale. So there's maybe 8,000 people who are my neighbours on Heron Island, and something's going on here. We've got crown of thorn starfish invading and damaging the reef quite badly this year, and so we choose to band together and pay a local organisation to go and cull some of those crown of thorn starfish and rebalance the reef a little bit there. So that's just sort of one example of what can be done practically. I think in terms of the data, one of the things that sort of I've been keeping a bit of a focus on recently is we haven't had this data to date. And so a lot of the times it's very, very reactive management. And, I think when we look back 3, 4, 5 years from now and we see that broad scale data and have the ability to run analytics on it, which look back in time and drill down to specific species and things like this, which have just not been possible before, then we can start to identify and preempt problems very early on. And rather than kind of looking back and going, this reef's been, really, really wiped out heavily this year because of X problem. Hopefully we can avoid some of that in the future as well.
Yeah, you mentioned like wanting to recruit the next set of scouts, and so I was a little bit like curious about like what are there any like incentive models or tying into like the initial NFT collection that like incentivizes people to go out and become scouts? Like what does that like process look like right now, or in the future you have planned?
Yeah, I think one of there's probably a range of ways that this will happen, but one of the clearest cut in our minds is this opportunity to engage in citizen science, and specifically at the moment, what we're interested in doing is mapping out some biodiversity data so that we can feed that into machine learning and have it then identify all of that particular species. So if I look around on my patch of the reef and I see, there's 5 or 6 clownfish or a black-tip reef shark on my patch of reef, I can annotate that. I can use the tools that we provide to the community to go in and draw a box around that and say, hey, I think that's what this is. I'm not an expert in this, but I think that's what it is. And on its own, that's not very valuable. But as with what we were talking about earlier, if we have 5,000 people, 10,000 people doing that, very, very quickly we can start to get to the point where we've got tens or even hundreds of species being identified by the community. And instead of having to look at millions or billions of photos, the experts who can sort of sign off on that and say, yes, that's definitely what that is, or no, that's not quite what that is, it's something else. They don't have to spend months or years poring over this data. They can get a refined data set and confirm what's there, deny what's there, and move that process along a lot faster. I think, Brett, the Crown of Thorns starfish data set that we did as an example, that took the three experts who reviewed it 3 or 4 months. Is that right, Brett?
Yeah. When we start dealing with massive amounts of data, if it has to be all analysed individually by human eyeballs looking at individual frames, it's an enormous amount of, it was 4 months for us to completely annotate a set of data from just one or two reefs.
And that's one species out of hundreds and hundreds of species that exist on the reef. It's such a densely populated, very biodiverse environment. It could take hundreds of years to do that the old way. Whereas if we can fast track that, using a really big community who are passionate, engaged, and also rewarded. And we do have some ideas around how we can reward that. Whether that's access to additional member benefits. Once you reach a certain level of citizen science support, or whether that's rewarding correct identification of species, in a really small way, so that over time, as you build that up, you actually built yourself a little bit of a nice little reward, or you can build up a collection of tokens which can then be redirected to direct on ground work. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that this can play out, and people might choose to take different kinds of rewards, but essentially it's about incentivizing good community behavior and good ReeFi behavior.
Yeah, I love that idea of essentially crowdsourcing recognition. Like that's something I think a lot of AI and ML will really leverage Web3 for, and that's like, it brings back the idea of like back in science class when the teacher like would tell you if you go to the new world and you identify a new species, you get to name it. Like that's what that, like, this is an opportunity for me as an individual to look at a uncharted piece of the world and then classify it. And I think even if you did little things like that, like name your own species if it's new, and little rewards like that, I really think just the exploration part of things is very, very exciting. Organics DAO requested to speak. Do you have any kind of questions about?
Yeah, I just more speaking about I like the concept about like being immersed in the VR of like knowing more about what's going on in the reef, like bringing educational awareness of like specific invasive species. Would there be like a way to like track or monitor specific like species migration to like different patches, or like people could keep track on different species moving throughout the patches?
Yeah, with the size of the reef and the current technology, that's difficult at anything more than sort of 1 year timeframes. But given that there's literally no visibility of that data currently, I think it's still pretty exciting that once a year we will get an update on that biodiversity. And just sort of going back to the Crown of Thorns example, it took 4 months to build that AI model, but now we have the ability to run that model live. When we when we go and collect data, and we can retroactively apply that model to all of the data that we've collected previously. So once those kind of processes are done, we can automatically identify the biodiversity that we have models for across the entire data set. And when that starts to get to whole of reef scale or multiple times over 4 or 5 years at whole of reef scale, I think there'll be quite a lot of really rich analytics that come out of that. Like you're saying, things have moved to warmer environments, things have moved into deeper water, or whatever that case might be.
Oh wow. And is there like maybe a way to like just say if someone can't be like at the reef like physically, is there a way they could like actively monitor or see what's going on, and
Could you could you clear that up, because I think there might be a little bit confusion. Like the people who are considered scouts, are they going through the digital twin, or are there going to be kind of people in the DAO that actually like go in the water and use this technology to monitor? I was under the impression that like that it was like very kind of expert technology to operate. You guys were collecting, and then like the scouts would be just looking at that simulation. Can you kind of clear that up?
Yeah, I think Brett, you just unmuted. You go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the technology allows us to cover 60 miles of reef every day per machine, and this is an enormous amount of imagery data which can be converted into a number of different products or experiences for people. But the reality is there's just not very many people visit most parts of the reef. There are quite literally reefs within the Great Barrier Reef system yet to be discovered. And for many of the ones we know about, for many of them, there's never been a human who has dived in the water and looked at those reefs. So in order to scale up from the current level of observation and monitoring and assessment of the reef, we need to have thousands of new eyeballs participating, millions even participating in this grand citizen science approach to analyze it. So yeah, these scouts can sit at their desk or in their lounge room anywhere around the world and see parts of the reef which no human has ever seen, and contribute through a variety of front-end tools to describing it and analyzing it, measuring its growth and things like that. And so there'll be people who discover not just fish in places where they didn't think they were, or corals that once were here but they're now gone, but there'll be people who discover entirely new reefs which have existed for time immemorial, and they're just not yet described. And hey, while I'm just here, I very, very quickly wanted to say I just noticed a couple of people came into the room. John Smith Gambala from the Central Great Barrier Reef area, acknowledge him, and also Alaz David from SOA Tanzania. I just wanted to reach out and say a quick hi to some of these guys who we've been interacting with and we hope to work with much, much closer in the future. But yeah, look, I think if we can bring that kind of big community experience to what is an incredibly large data set, then everybody can have some real exciting things to do and participate in a really meaningful way.
I think the other aspect of that, Brett, is while the data will largely be driven in the short term by the glider, unlike the terrestrial environment where, for example, we could take a photo of the Eiffel Tower that's geo-tagged, it's got a GPS location, we can compare it to millions of other photos of the Eiffel Tower and sort of really accurately locate where that photo was taken from and what time and all the rest of it. That facility doesn't exist currently. But once we start to map out some of these environments, it does start to allow us to take data from Joe Citizen, who might be on a holiday, or a local revisiting their favorite patch of reef on a regular basis, and take their photos and photo match it to our geospatially accurate data set, and get more regular updates or more high quality photography, and start to attach like local stories to some of this and all that sort of thing.
I think awareness is a huge part of this, and I'm personally not too aware of kind of the damage to the reefs, and like how humans have been impacting the coral reefs, and also work that marine biologists like Brett's doing, that has helped like mitigate or raise awareness. Can you kind of talk about like a little bit about the reefs, and then how kind of concept is going around there, or like any efforts currently for conservation?
Yeah, look, hey, if you don't mind, I'll relate one of my very, very early experiences on the Great Barrier Reef, and understand that even though I now have 8 grandchildren, and I'm towards the end of my career, of course, the Great Barrier Reef existed for tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years before now, and people have been studying it for at least another 50 years prior to when I began studying it. On my very first field cruise into the central part of the Great Barrier Reef, where I was the cruise leader, at the end of our day, we finished up the plankton sampling work that we were doing, and we dropped a fishing line over the side of the boat, and we caught a couple of fish, which loved to take home to our families and wives and children. And so then the skipper calls us in for dinner into the galley and says, "Guys, how did you go fishing?" And I think I was the one who said, "Oh, we had an awesome time. We 3 of us caught 9 fish between us." And he looked at us and excuse the French here, guys, but he said, "You guys are wankers. You don't have any idea of what the reef was like prior to now." He said, "When I was a young boy," now this is a guy who at the time was nearing his retirement. He said, "When I was a young boy, if we had spent an hour or two fishing on the back deck, we'd have boated hundreds and hundreds of fish." And he said, "You guys fish for a couple of hours, 3 of you, and you only get 9 fish. This is..." So in my mind, the moral of that story is the reef has already changed enormously from what it used to look like, and part of that's overfishing, etc. Climate change and marine heat waves are impacting the reef more nowadays than they have in the past, and all of these things are changes which have happened within our lifetimes, and certainly in the period of time when Europeans have jumped in and done what they do, and mass scale alteration of their environment, and it's led to this situation where there now needs to be some fairly large scale action taken if we're going to see the reef exist in anything like the form it is today as we move into the next few decades.
Brett, do you want to just quickly maybe get into the brain coral and how fast it grows, and why that becomes an issue? So even though some of the recent findings indicate that the reef's grown back really nicely after some of that big damage from climate change, there's a lingering problem there.
Yeah. I'm going to say some of our North American listeners in particular might be aware of the redwood forests. And of course, some of those redwood trees, they're enormous, but they're also very, very old, and they grow very, very slowly. And if you can have trees which are 500 years old or closer to 1,000 years old, if you were to cut those down and watch what regrows, you would find fast growing species, some of the pines, or in for example Southern California, you would find eucalyptus growing very, very fast. And so you end up with trees, but you end up with a very, very different kind of tree. Now, one of the things that people will see in the first of the AR apps that's going to come out is there's a bommy that David and I looked at on Heron Island, and it's now photographed into this app in 3D. You can walk around it and see different things on the bommy. But that particular coral is 700 years old. And so if we start to experience marine heat waves or cyclones or crown of thorn starfish, all of which kill large areas of coral, but the frequency with which the coral dies is too quick, then things like these old corals can't regrow. And so even though we might have something that looks like a reef, it won't be the same kind of reef that existed beforehand. So there are quite a few types of coral on the Great Barrier Reef, which are in fact very, very slow growing. And there is not yet a lot of evidence of the loss of these, but we know that they can't regrow quickly. And so we know that if we had the right monitoring data sets, we would find evidence that these things are already beginning to disappear and go locally extinct.
Yeah, that's incredible. I see a lot of potential to essentially set a lot of the casework and justification for more conservation. And yeah, and so what are like the main? We're kind of coming around the hour mark, but I wanted to know, like, what were the main kind of call to actions for the audience and for people who want to help out? Like, what can they do to join ReeFi DAO or to spread your messaging or about conservation in the reef? Like, yeah, how can people get involved?
I certainly, jumping in and being part of spaces like this and sharing the story is a really good way to, to bring more people to the table and have questions asked and answered. So this is really great, and just wanted to shout out and say thank you so much for the opportunity. In terms of what we need now, we've got a wealth of experience in marine biology and some great community development. We've got lots of experience and proof of concepts now around the augmented reality and the virtual reality and different ways of interpreting and viewing the data and making that accessible to a community. What we don't have a lot of skills or experience in amongst our team is the tokenomics and the blockchain development side of things. So really keen to hear from anyone who might have experience and interest in those areas and be interested in joining their team and supporting what we're doing. We have a bit of a project plan for a phase 1 rollout. I think I sort of hinted at this early on for Heron Island, approximately 8,000 patches. That's a fairly typical NFT collection in terms of its size, but it'll be one of many collections, and certainly we plan to scale that up to at least 10 million. And unlike other NFT collections, this NFT collection will truly be about utility. It's about really just creating keys that unlock a whole host of engagement and community building and citizen science and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think doing even a separate space where we workshop kind of incentive models and the best way to build a community that sustains around this citizen science would be awesome. I also knew a few people in the space that I think are would be great to link with. I know there's a project called Hidden Worlds. They're like an activation experience like dinner where they essentially put like AR and project uh, different ocean landscapes with pollution and without pollution. So you'll see like like a turtle like choking on like the soda plastic, and then what they do is they actually measure your heartbeat, and they have kind of a neuro footprint to see people's reactions to different environmental scenes without pollution, and they're also looking to get into Web3 space and actually have missions to the experiences be through beach cleanups, and then there's another one that is called Ocean Protocol. It actually has nothing to do with oceans, but I would definitely check this out because what they are is they're on a lot of Ethereum compatible chains, but they're a protocol for uh, selling data and selling data streams, and essentially a data marketplace that you can easily like fork and turn into your own application. So this may be a way of actually distributing the data directly if you want to tokenize it on that front. But I definitely think there's also projects like Social Stack. They allow people to develop their own tokens to incentivize people for campaigns. What do you guys have any kind of blockchains in mind that you guys are looking to develop this on already, or you guys before are you have you not thought about that yet?
We've taken a lot of advice from different people, lots of conflicting opinions, but I guess for us, there's a couple of really key things. Obviously, the space that we're working in, building in. A green chain is really high on our list, but also understanding at the same time we need to be on a chain that's going to allow us to scale and being able to do a million NFTs or 10 million NFTs alongside of for patches specifically, but then also potentially NFTs of in-game assets or data storage project project life cycles living on chain, those sorts of things. So I think scalability is really key, and sort of like the yin and yang of the environmentally friendliness of a chain, and the ability to scale and have high capacity is really key.
Yeah, that's I think that's like I'm not going to give essential like current recommendations on the chain. I think a lot of chains are searching to a carbon neutral and carbon negative approach. Algorand, Cello, Near have been really big on that, and Cello recently on ReeFi. Whether everything will scale with a certain amount of users, will actually only know under those network conditions. So I wouldn't kind of focus on that. I just wanted to know because a lot of people they're like, all right, I'm doing ReeFi, I should do Cello. I'm an NFT, I should do Solana. So I kind of wanted to see where your head was at in that. But I think more importantly than what chain it is on is the overall tokenomics and the incentive models comes first and foremost. So I'd definitely like to rally on up and see who from the Web3 space wants to support this and come and help you guys ideate. I think this is a beautiful idea. I think this can be really turned into like a staple ReeFi project, and I haven't heard anything like this. So yeah, I definitely want to follow in and tap on. I do have to go. I do have a meeting, but yeah, if anyone has any questions, we'll take a minute. Otherwise, yeah, we can end the thing.
Yeah, I'm still kind of curious how I know the ocean is like fast and all, but just like how do you go about like displacement of certain like invasive species? Do you like randomly incubate it and take it away and put it to a different batch, or like how do you keep that balanced flow? Um, yeah, of certain patches in the ocean.
Brett, do you want to speak to that one?
I actually didn't hear that question. I'm sorry.
It was more so about like displacement of certain like invasive species. Do you like randomly take it out and incubate it to a different batch or a patch of ocean, or do you like know where it's gonna go to just keep a balance, or like you leave it to a different environment and then test it out and see how it goes?
So Brett, probably COTS management is probably a good example.
Yeah, David, something happening here at my end. I am getting gaps in hearing what's going on. Look, there's certainly a great number of things which this community can actively contribute to, and have a short-term positive change in the Great Barrier Reef. And yes, Crown of Thorns management is one of them. These starfish are naturally part of the Great Barrier Reef system, but when they have their outbreaks, they eat vast areas of coral. And by helping to map those and direct resources to where they can be eradicated, then it's already proven to have a positive impact on those reefs where the starfish are controlled.
So is it so you just like move it to a different like places, part of the ocean that doesn't have really coral so they can feed on, or
No, it's more about killing the crown of thorn starfish to keep their numbers down to manageable levels. One of the reasons that they get to plague proportions now is things like overfishing of the species of fish which predate them.
they'll eat them. Oh, I see. Yeah,
Yeah.
whole hierarchy, a food chain. Yeah.
Yo, good morning,
Good
Brother
morning.
Brett. Good morning. It's John Smith Kumbala. I'm up early. It's quite early in the morning here, guys, 2 a.m. But thanks so much for allowing me the time to have just a quick chat, just from an Indigenous perspective. So I'm actually one of the family members. There's over 70, 80 traditional Indigenous groups that we have a connection with the Great Barrier Reef. Now, that connection has those who are familiar with the Indigenous people here in Australia. So globally, we're looking at 6% of the world population of Indigenous people. So we got a very powerful connection, ancient connection with that biodiversity of the planet, and that's from the oceans to the lands and many unique places in the Great Barrier Reef. People have had that connection for thousands and thousands of years. We have over 100,000 years of history and connection here in Australia. And the Great Barrier Reef has many stories. So imagine that interaction from a cultural perspective, our people living, fishing, living within that biodiversity, connected in a spiritual way, physical way, ceremonies. So the knowledge that Aboriginal people have or Indigenous people have is something very important for that scientific analysis, for that scientific data. So Brett and David could explain a little bit more, but having that relationship, having inclusive engagements with Indigenous people, with Aboriginal people, understanding, because this goes from the southern tip right up to Thursday Island. So each area, Indigenous families have a very unique connection with the Great Barrier Reef, understanding those species, understanding that connection, and also seeing over many decades, many thousands of years, the changes of the Great Barrier Reef, water levels changing, over 7,000 years ago, the water levels have changed, many different connections there with those communities. So they have a personal, cultural, spiritual, and understanding of the Great Barrier Reef. And I think the work that ReeFi is doing is such an important part of that process for us as a community and citizens of the world to understand how important those species are, how important the reef is to our survival. Tell science, the old people. Oh, my old grandfather used to tell me when I was a little boy. So my family also from the Waka Waka people, from coastline, inland to freshwater to saltwater, Garang Garang. And they used to say that you got to look at the animals. All the animals have signs, have a connection. They can tell you things, whether it's the land animals, birds, animals, or even the sea life. Changes, little things that change, can be something that the Great Barrier Reef is trying to tell us. So, I'm very inspired by the work that they're doing, and as an Aboriginal man, as an Indigenous man, we're there to support within this project, and our contribution is, we're very blessed to be working with these guys. So, I just wanted to say that and say hi to everyone out there around the world. I'm John Smith Gumbala. We're part also, we're doing the Indigi NFT projects. So bringing more sort of, people, knowledge about Indigenous people of the world. So that's where we are, and that connection with conservation, marine conservation is very important. Matt.
Yeah, for people who don't know John, he's a very, 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 very talented Indigenous artist. And we're certainly, as he alluded to, really looking forward to, once we have this data and we connect people to the reef and give them the ability to explore the biodiversity of their own patch of reef. Not just learning about what a shark is and where it lives and why and what it feeds on and things like that, but also looking at its cultural relevance and connecting people to different forms of art around sharks and things like that. So this project very much has a wide reach into education, arts, culture, history, and I think all of those things combining really make this a powerful narrative for people to feel part of something solid.
Yeah, I definitely love the deep, rich culture and the spiritual connection as well. It's really beautiful, beautiful said, John.
Happy to take any more questions, but otherwise, yeah, we might wrap up. And thank you very much for the space.
Yeah, thank you so much for what you guys are doing and for coming on and sharing your project and sharing your stories. I definitely want to tap in with you guys. And yeah, let's develop some tokenomics around it till next time. So definitely tap in. See everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you.
I'm about to
Bye.
drop. What was the name
Yo,
of the is it Boko? What was the is it the tribal name?
Garang Garang.
Yeah, it's in his bio.
But okay, I'm definitely look that up. I like researching and learning more
Yeah,
about
cool.
other people's cultures. Yeah,
I'll give John a follow and check out his bio. He has all the info there.
definitely will do.
But yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, everybody.
Yo, Matt. Thanks, guys. Nice to be on here and see. I'll catch up with you, Brett, brother David. There, we'll catch up at some point.
Definitely.
But
Thanks, mate.
yeah, a lot of important things there. A lot of amazing work these guys are doing. Very inspiring, and having indigenous people involved with that is at the table is an important part of that process. And we look forward to long-term and sustainable initiatives and bringing focus to the planet, to the indigenous people, and also that's a very important part of those connections. So I'm going to go to sleep now, guys.
Hey, thanks, brother John. Hey, and I'll sign off as well.